So what we have here is a couple of things. Wanted to run some of the entry-level steamers, right? You know, from the 40s into the early 50s. That's typical of a 242. And that one right there is actually a later model. That's into the 90s. And this is in the late 70s into the early 80s. Of course, it's a all plastic MPC era that I've modified. And the second thing is I'm exploring just the different transformers and different remote things that you can get typically from Lowe's or eBay. Doesn't have to be some model railroad specific device. This right here is a light dimmer, and I have it installed inside that tender. And this was a DC only locomotive that Lionel had offered back at that period of time, trying to keep costs down. So in that tender, you can go back to my earlier videos, there's a rectifier, and then in between the rectifier and the locomotive I put a light dimmer that can either be accessed and controlled by this remote right here or a Bluetooth app. Take your pick. It doesn't really matter. It listens to both, which is pretty cool. And it's growing on me. And if you look at my prior videos, I've got a similar device that I've installed in my MTH 2882, which, by the way, is the genesis of all this stuff, because I got it with a bad board. And I first ran it with that tender right there way back almost a year ago now. And now I've put in about $12 worth of eBay electronics so I can run it with a rectifier regulated. And then after the regulated voltage, I put a light dimmer such as this one, so I can both jack the track voltage to a high number, have it regulated down to a normal number, and then fine tune that output from the power supply by a remote device. And I get a lot of benefits from that. I spent $12. No, I think I spent $20 on this one because I had a much better, higher amperage rating power supply in that locomotive. But anyway, and then, you know, I've had this for a while. I've got two of these. I got a Z-750 and a Z-1000. And this one here is supposed to be able to handle a fair amount of amperage and power output. And what I found is it can, but this guy right here wants to melt itself once I start putting on multiple Lionel pull-mores, you know. So all this stuff, right? For me, it's fun tinkering like that. And there's no risk or value in a locomotive like this. They're not worth anything anyway, right? That came out of a New Englander set. But having this level of control really does enhance the fun for me. Better locations, I can get to different locations and get better pictures, you know, and have control of the remote instead of having to be saddled by a transformer with a control knob. And that's also forgetting this right here. This is all remote switches to turn on and off the power supply to the whole layout. So we've got a fair number and a fair variety of remote type applications and controls. And some I like more than others, and I think that's where I'm going. This by far is the most convenient. And I think I'm going to add this style of power and control, power supply and control, where I have a regulated and rectified power supply with a remote to control the final voltage to the locomotive, the motors. Very, very, very flexible. Very, very cool. This combined with being able to control the entire layout in case there's a problem gives me a safe way of getting right into the middle, you know, and not worrying about if there's a derailment or some kind of a problem, because I can shut the whole thing off with this remote. And I can control the speed of the locomotive with this one And like I said a couple times in prior videos, having the power supply with a regulated output voltage allows me to move the track voltage above that regulated output voltage, so the steamer or the steam unit works better, the lights are brighter, stuff like that. But I have control of the speed, and since the track voltage is higher than the regulated output of the power supply in that tender, if there's slight fluctuations in the track voltage due to, you know, distance from drops and dirty tracks and stuff like that, you don't see it on the speed, because that fluctuation is still at a higher voltage than the regulated output that's required for these little can motors. So I get the best of a couple of worlds with that, you know, the remote. This right here for the conventional trains, being able to remotely control the transformer, I'm still working to get used to it, because there's such a delay between, you know, hitting a button and having something happen. I can demonstrate that right here. So I've got the layout turned on, so I know the transformer's on, and I want to get this old this old vintage 1940s era locomotive started. So with this MTH remote, this is actually quite old, I'll start adding voltage. Watch that little light blinking, and then you see the voltage climbing. Now it does have an emergency stop, right? It has direction control and supposedly bell and whistle, which doesn't seem to work with the old ones. I'm sure it works with the MTH locomotives of that era. But that kind of a delay, or that kind of lag in terms of desire and output voltage does make it something you have to get used to, right? As compared to having your hand right on the dial. You know, it kind of clicks its way up and works its way back down. So I'm kind of getting used to it. Sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. And of course I can use this style of transformer with the regulated rectified locomotives as well. Just ramp it right up to, say, 15 volts, and then use the remote controlling the output from that regulated rectifier, right? So this kind of gets you the best of both worlds. And plus I just want to run these oddball ones nobody really cares about. You know, these are not the most popular, but I have fun anyway. They need some runtime. So where am I going to go with this? Well, I do have a Bluetooth Lionel, and I have not operated that with the Lionel app. I think we're going to give that a shot and kind of compare the functionality and actual cost as compared to just doing some of these retrofits. I guess the fact of the matter is you can never do the modern retros to some of these older locomotives. So my regulator, rectifier, power supply, light dimmer combination actually can bring up the functionality of these old things. Now, I sure wouldn't do it on a collector, right? That doesn't make any sense. But on some of the older, lower value Lionel trains, it kind of adds a level of functionality that was never in their time frame when they were popular. They didn't have that kind of thing. And so adding some of these new devices kind of increases the functionality and fun factor for me, and not very much cost. Kind of a derivative of kit bashing, just with electronics. So anyway, let me get them all going again. Here's the old style direct control. 1990s. So we have different eras here. And let's see if we can get this one going again. I gotta get it up to about 12 or 15 volts. See it stepping up? I just hold on to that button. There it goes. Well, there's your emergency stops. Hit that one, stop that one cold. Hit the red button right there and it stopped that one cold. So both those remotes have that functionality. Now, of course, the reason why I did it on this one is, let's pull it back and you can see. Yeah. All right, let's start these again. So notice that the voltage on this one still hasn't dropped because I haven't turned down the transformer. I just shut off the locomotive with the control. Let's get going again. I'll give it percentages. %. And then I'll shut the whole thing off. There you go, remotes. So we're at the western end of the DeWitt yard, and I believe this is going to be I-007 coming through here, and it has a surprise for us. I am very, very, very surprised to get this particular locomotive. Let's see if we can get a good picture of it.